After 25 years, I had the big title, the beautiful corner office. You got a huge salary, bonus, award-winning, somewhat of the golden girl in the company, in the industry. I was fired.
What were you afraid of in that moment?
I'm straddling these two identities, this high-powered executive and this mom that wants to be with the kids, but more importantly, the kids deserve a mom that isn't exhausted. This whole notion of work-life balance is bullshit.
Speaking with women particularly, what's their themes that you hear?
External presentation of perfection is what starts to kind of break them down. So I'm here to say that you are the only one that can actually design a life that you love that is successful on your terms.
And you talk about the self-architect method.
One of the first questions from both men and women I would get is, okay, Loretta, if balance is bullshit, then what?
This is Retail in America, and I'm Ron Thurston. For 2 seasons, this show has been about the people, the stores, the technology solutions, and the operators reshaping how America shops. This season is sharper. It's about the human edge of selling and what it actually takes to win a customer in a world where algorithms handle the easy part, AI agents handle the decisions, and the only thing left worth paying a premium for is a human who actually knows how to sell. Every guest this season has built something, run something, or figured something out about how to do that. So let's get into it, because today my guest is Loretta Soffe, and I want to start with an image of a driveway. Picture a woman pulling into it, designer outfit, beautiful house, a husband who paused his own career so the kids could thrive, the job title, the front row at Fashion Week. Everything in the picture may seem perfect, but she can't get out of the car because she's completely and quietly exhausted. That woman was Loretta, 25 years climbing Nordstrom, from the sales floor to the executive vice president of a $2 billion division, right up until she was fired at the peak. What she figured out in that driveway became a book called Balance is Bullshit, and a second act. Today, she works with companies on a problem most of them are quietly bleeding money on. They lose their most capable people, not because they fail, but because they burn out running a race against standards that were never theirs. Her argument to CHROs and L&D leaders is that this is a business problem, not a wellness one, and that the fix isn't balance, it's actually alignment. So Loretta, welcome to Retail in America.
Thank you so much, Ron. I'm so thrilled to have this conversation. It's overdue and I think really timely with what's going on, not just in the industry, but with women, and I would argue some men as well. So I'm excited to get into it.
Thank you. And you and I have known each other for several years. We had friends in common who said that we needed to meet. I think we agreed it was probably 2021. So you're right. This is long overdue. So take us back to that driveway, Loretta. Tell us kind of what was going through your mind. Why couldn't you get out of the car? People that have had moments where they felt like they were frozen. What were you afraid of in that moment?
I remember pulling into my driveway, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, probably had kicked off my Jimmy Choos in the driver's seat, looking in at my husband who had willingly paused his legal career for what we thought was 1 year and quickly became 12 years. 3 kids, happy, healthy, thriving. I had the big title, the beautiful corner office, as you mentioned, flights all over the country, even all over the world on the private plane, sitting front row. And on the outside, it looked like I had it all. I had this perfect, beautiful white house. I couldn't get out of the car because, yes, I was exhausted. And I was also calculating Sam's sacrifice. How long is he or are we going to do this? How long am I going to miss dinner with the 3 kids and come in after the fact and do the cleanup? And I thought to myself in that moment, I'm straddling these two identities, this high powered executive and this mom that wants to be with the kids. But more importantly, the kids deserve a mom that isn't exhausted. So it wasn't, what should I do? It's, how do I keep doing something that I knew at that moment was unsustainable? And it was, I can't get out of the car because I don't know what seat I should stay in. Should I stay in that executive seat? Should I take on a seat as a mom? And how can I possibly keep this up and do both?
And as you've built more of a business speaking and speaking with women particularly, where often is their mindset? Because I love this quote from you of like that it looks like they're fine on the outside, but they're crackling underneath. And when you speak to women, what's the themes that you hear?
It's pretty consistent. There's a couple things. They justify the exhaustion. They put it off to, it's just this quarter. It's just this board meeting. It's just this product launch or store opening. And they justify the exhaustion as kind of the greens fees of doing the job. And it's interesting because it's almost like what got them to the place they are in their career is what prevents them from seeing that they're drowning. So it's this hard work. It's the ability to take on more, to say yes, to push through that discomfort. And it's because of that that they actually don't see the signs and the data that they're crumbling. So I'd say where it starts with most of the women that I work with, it starts in their head, on those drives to and from work, on those airplane flights across the country where they're starting to kind of have this self-talk, which is, I don't know if I can do it again. I don't know if I can go through this market. I don't know if I can go through this season. How am I ever going to get through this board meeting? They start to have that little bit of self-talk in their head. And then it transfers into, I'll miss that dinner with the kids. I'll miss that presentation at the school. I've got a meeting. I've got to prepare. We've got like an emergency, situation with, something. So it kind of starts in the head. It goes to the home. And then before you know it, unfortunately and unintentionally, sometimes it starts to show up at work where they're slipping. They're a little distracted. They're exhausted. They just don't feel like themselves. So that external presentation of perfection, which is imposed externally, is what starts to kind of break them down.
Fascinating. And your situation maybe in some ways is unique because your choice to create change wasn't yours.
Correct. As after 25 years, award-winning, somewhat of the golden girl in the company, in the industry, I was fired by Pete Nordstrom, who I worked for. And it was a decision that was made by the family, the Nordstrom family, and the executive team, where, sometimes results are results. And even if you as the leader think they're good enough, oftentimes they aren't good enough. So that decision was imposed upon me. And I was asked recently, had you not been fired, would you have quit? And it really stopped me in my tracks because the honest truth is probably not. And it's as unsustainable as I think the pace was and the balancing act I was trying to perform, I had the golden handcuffs. When you've got all the benefits, you've got a beautiful big office, you've got the title, you've got access, you've got a huge salary, bonus, benefits, and a husband who has not worked in 12 years, you're kind of handcuffed to the financial equation, and you don't necessarily imagine or even want to think about what's next. So I'd say that while that decision was imposed upon me and it was the worst thing that could have ever happened in that moment, it turned out to be the best thing that could have ever happened.
I'll definitely want to get into that when we get further along. And so because you would likely have also never written a book. you would have never done this work. At first, you wouldn't have had time because you would, as a fellow author, I know the time and commitment it takes to do that work. But you would never have written this book, and this would not have been your platform, and you would not have the ability to create change.
Yes, exactly. I remember so vividly the conversation in Pete's office that day. It was a Tuesday in January. I'll never forget it. I literally can remember what I was wearing, and the chill I still get describing and recalling that moment is something when you're on the other end of something that you had nothing to do with, there is a bit of a PTSD moments for quite a while. But I'll tell you, it was that walk out of my office, out of that building, out of that sixth floor executive hallway, which I've never been back to since. Walking out of that building, which is all I really knew for 25 years post-college, getting back into my car, and I sat at that same steering wheel, and I thought, everything I have been trying to keep up in the air, all the plates spinning, all the balls juggling, as a mom, a wife, a daughter, a friend, a community member, a leader of a huge business, it's bullshit. I can't keep it going. And I remember driving home, looking out our kitchen window thinking, wow, it's like someone washed the windows. I can see clearly. And no mistakes. It wasn't immediate. I definitely had some crisis and PTSD to deal with. Like, what did I do wrong? How did this happen? Why did this happen? But over time, when I was able to kind of sit without a calendar full of meetings and phone calls and things to review and do, I was able to kind of get quiet with myself and understand that doing more was impossible. Continuing to do what I was doing was impossible. And there's got to be a different way. And that kind of clarity was the first step in where we are today, to getting clear about, what do I want to do? I hadn't even had the time to ask myself. I'd been almost programmed like a robot to just get up, go through the day. If I was lucky, swim before I went to the office, run into the office. And you're on meetings every hour on the hour, making decisions, helping your people, trying to move the business forward. And then you switch gears, and then your real job starts if you're a mom of 3 kids, no matter who's helping you. And you turn around and you do that until you collapse, you fall in bed, and you get up and do it again. And so I had never really had that time to sit quietly and ask myself, what do I really want this next unimposed chapter to be like?
And your advocacy through the book and your speaking isn't that women shouldn't strive to have the big roles. It isn't that they shouldn't think about their careers. You're not saying that. You're saying we have to re-examine how to realign your life in a way where you're not sitting in the car, in the driveway, exhausted and probably much deeper health issues that come along with that kind of a life as we get older. So tell us more about that, because you're not advocating that women quit their job tomorrow.
No, not at all. In fact, I think what you said is reevaluating what they want it to look like. But I think if we back up, it's, yes, you can have an incredible career, whether that's a C-suite role or something else. No matter what, you can have a great job, a fulfilling, purposeful job, and a wholehearted life, marriage, motherhood, whatever that looks like for you. You can have all that, but that's going to require 2 things, or multiple things. Number 1, that's going to require you acknowledging and letting go of a standard of success that is unrealistic. For whatever reason, society has imposed this notion and view of success that's unrealistic. And I think it's done women in particular a huge disservice. So that's the first thing. And that's really what I'm calling out, that this whole notion of work-life balance is bullshit. I'm a big believer in go all in on your work when you need to. If you have a board meeting, a project, a product launch, a store opening, a market week, go 150% in on that. Give it your all with the confidence that the rest of your life is going to be sustained and move along. For me as a mom, what that meant was 2 or 3 weeks of market weeks in a February or September timeframe. My husband knew it. My kids were little, but as they got older, they knew that I was going to be pretty preoccupied and traveling for 3 weeks. Maybe not 3 weeks straight, but I was going to be busy, not super available. After those 3 weeks, I could essentially turn off my phone back in the day and engage with them for a 3 or 4 day weekend or a family vacation. And then I would go all in on that. That's what it's all about. It's not trying to do all things all the time at once, because what that will give you is 2 things, burnout or mediocrity. And I see that often where I would have employees, they're in a meeting looking at a new product line for a new season, and their phone's blowing up because the babysitter's asking all different questions or the kid is asking questions. It's arm those caregivers or your children with the ability to make decisions and to be self-sufficient and trust them to do just that so that you can be 100% present where you are in that moment.
Right. It does feel like what you're describing, Loretta, is such a learned skill. And you had mentioned you had just spoken to a large audience of very young women. I often speak on college campuses and speak to young people. And for whatever reason, work-life balance is this phrase that I think someone has said to them that, oh, I want work-life balance. And my first response, I'm curious yours, is like, well, what does that mean to you? And I don't know that they have the answer to that question, because what you're describing, you learned how to do over time. You navigated your life, but it's how much of it is learned and how much of it can be read in books like yours.
I think it can be, I think it is learned. I think it requires clarity about what is actually important to the individual. And with that clarity typically comes a confidence and a courage to say yes and no. And I think young people today are so much more curious than we were. I had a meeting yesterday with a young man who was asking so many questions that were so thoughtful and mature. And I thought, you know what? You are well on your way. And we talked a little bit about that. And I asked him, what does work life or what does school and life look like for you during the school year? And what does it look like for you in the summer? And he had some pretty mature answers. I think it's the learned and saying yes and no to things is going to be really helpful. In my book, I talk a lot about what it takes and what needs to be in place. We'd all be naive to say that you don't need a strong support system. You do. Whether you're a 20-year-old, a 40-year-old, or a 60-year-old, you need a strong support system, whether that's for childcare, whether that's for accountability, whether that's for running a big business, whether that's as an entrepreneur. You have to have things in place. And that doesn't mean you have to be wealthy to have those things in place. It could be that what you have in place is a view of what success looks like for you and the courage and confidence to say yes and no to things and have boundaries.
Courage and confidence. Yeah. So such good words too. And you just connected a dot for me when you say support system. The support system is also your network. You know, this kind of networking term that we use that people have such an aversion to, networking. You're building a support system. You and I both have had successful books because we had a professional support system around us, and people that are here to support us. They're not helping us in day-to-day life, but I would consider, the followings of shows like this and others, this is a support system for
Yeah,
people.
your network is your net worth.
Yeah.
Your network isn't the people you're just dialing because you might need something somewhat insignificant or whatever. Your network is people like you that you can call and have an honest conversation and get advice and learn from the path that they've taken that you might be on or exploring. Um, but I also would say, like with that conversation I had with that young man yesterday, I feel like network and mentors can be kind of interchangeable.
Mhm.
And I said to him, your mentors are everywhere. And just like I was mentoring him as a high school senior, he's also mentoring me because he's challenging me with a set of questions I haven't even thought about in a long time. So I think that it's that support system becomes the network, also becomes the mentor kind of circle that is in giving you receive. It's just it's an iterative kind of circle that is just, I think, so important in business, but in life.
Absolutely agreed. And we assign a lot of weight to identifying someone as mentor, but in fact, what you're describing, you're being mentored through your support network without identifying it or using that word. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's not as linear, I think, as people want to make it as such. That these are my mentors, this is my network, this is my family, this is my friends. Surround yourself with smart, interesting, engaging people who provide different things at different times.
Yeah, and I think I'll bump this to a little bit of the human side of business, and I think that this concept of mentoring and shadowing and just like tying ropes within organizations is like a lost art. And I think that there's been such a de-emphasis on the human edge, the human factor, the human value within a business that there's such a business case for. Um, I would have to believe that, the statistic where 1 out of 2 people are considering leaving their job, I would say primarily because they're either not physically with their counterparts and or direct reports, but there's not this sense of support system, camaraderie, culture, trust, like group mentality. And I think that this is going to be such a negative impact to businesses that they're just really underestimating right now.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. It's so challenging to not be in those work environments around team members because if you're working remote in your home, you're deep into your phone and social media, whatever habits you have. They're lifting your head up and being human to human. That's why I'm such you and I both, frontline brick and mortar retail advocate. This is very much the future because we need it. We, as humans, we need it. It's a really interesting moment. I think the next couple of years will be fascinating, the speed at which things are moving.
Well, what's so interesting, I was listening to an Arthur Brooks podcast on happiness and job satisfaction and employee like mentality and mental health. Burnout is at an all-time high since going remote. And he, as a professor and expert on the human behavior and condition and happiness, has a thesis that there's a direct correlation to people being isolated to being burned out. And it's a couple things. They don't ever have a start-stop. They're not with their counterparts. They don't really know where they stand with their employer, their who they report to. And the businesses are suffering as well because customers, that's where they start to create a loyalty to a brand, and a trust is when they can physically interact with a person.
Yeah, agreed. Arthur Brooks is fast. I saw him give a TEDx here in Miami last year, and his insights are really interesting. I would highly
Oh,
recommend it.
I know. It's so interesting.
So interesting. I want to take just a step deeper into the book because you've built a framework, and you talk about the self-architect method. So if you can walk us through what that is, and then maybe take a deep dive into one of them, I'd be so curious to learn more.
Yes, and the genesis of the self-architect method as the solution was really because during the first couple months of my book tour, one of the first questions from both men and women I would get is, okay, Loretta, if balance is bullshit, then what? And it seemed really obvious to me, but for most people, they're like, okay, yes, I am struggling. I am in a point in my life where I can't keep all these balls in the air. I can't keep juggling. So what do I do? And I think that forced me to come up with this framework that for me was, as you asked before, somewhat learned and then put into practice once I actually had the crises and the moments where I could actually get clear. And so the self-architect method, the philosophy is really around getting rid of a externally imposed view of success that doesn't work. And usually that has come from society, your boss, your mother, an influencer, whatever you grew up thinking this is what it's supposed to look like. So I'm here to say that, you know what? No, you are the only one that can actually design a life that you love that is successful on your terms. And the way you do that is through these 5 steps. Number 1, you got to define, what is success? What does it look like for me? And what are the values that I hold really high and important for the long haul? Then the second one is audit. Let's take a look at, where are you spending your time, your energy, your decisions? That's what we're going to come back to. The third one is rebuild. And that doesn't mean blowing up your life and starting over. For most of the clients that I work with, and when I'm speaking to large groups, it's make one decision today that you can change. Stop doing, start doing. That's the start of creating the life you love. And then the fourth thing is align. Now let's align and understand that gap between what you identified as success, which is largely your values that you want to live by, and how you're spending your time. So now let's put that into practice. Let's make change. And typically, that's cutting out a lot of unnecessary stuff. And then the fifth and kind of the evergreen part of the framework is expand. Once you have that clarity and you kind of stop shrinking and trying to fit someone else's version of success, you expand with confidence and courage into a life you're building that you love. And it is so remarkable to see this in action. I'll go back to that second step in the 5-step process, which is the audit. And a lot of times in a group workshop situation, I'll take people through an exercise called 25 to 5. And most recently, I had a group ages 20 to 65, all women in a room. And I give them a piece of paper and write down 25 things that are kind of on your mind, in your orbit, on your calendar, on your to-do list, however you organize the things that you want to do. And for a lot of people, it's two or three multiple places. It's the calendar, it's a note in their phone, it's the to-do list, it's some sticky notes, it's the husband or the family Google Calendar. I don't care where it comes from, let's write it down, 25 things. Now, I'm going to ask you to force that down to 5. What are the 5 things that really, really matter? And it is so amazing. And then people go around the room and they share a handful of things that come off. And it is cupcakes for the soccer team, driving carpool for swim team, being a timer at the swim meet, dropping off or collecting team uniforms for last season's lacrosse team. It's, redoing the picture wall at grandma's beach house. I mean, it is hilarious all of those things are valid, but are they aligning with the most important values and things in your life? Which, for example, for me, when I left and I was able to get clear, were time with my husband, time with my kids, my fitness, my faith, a purpose-filled job, being involved with one kid at a time per season. So it's amazing when you get to that audit, the things that creep in that force the things that matter off for a lot of women. Fitness is completely gone. Date nights with their husband, gone, canceled. The things that stay on are these reoccurring meetings with their team. For what purpose? It's just because it's been a reoccurring meeting. So the audit, I think, is where the biggest ahas come from. And then the rest can start to go from there.
And is there a part of that identifying maybe if I audit this down to 5, how much time does that give me back? Is there like an estimate number of hours? Well, now I have 4 hours more in my week. How do I want to spend it?
Yeah, it's hours in the week, and there is an uncomfortableness with those hours initially because women in particular are kind of programmed to fill every waking hour from the minute they wake up on the phone to when they literally collapse on the phone again in bed. There's a real uncomfortableness with, gosh, what if I had a couple hours? I had a client recently who has a big business. She's the breadwinner. They have 5 kids, like 3 that are under the roof. But even if they're not under your roof per se as adult kids, they're still occupying emotional, kind of mental, and sometimes financial energy. But this particular client said she gets in a funk if she actually has a day off with too much to do. And we're working on that. There's no like one size fits all solution for that. She just is uncomfortable taking things off the calendar, off her brain, out of her energy because she doesn't know what to do with herself. And that's where you have to get to that clarity about what matters. And then that'll give you the confidence and courage to make some different decisions. So more to come on that, but that is a very common feeling that, well, what would I do? What would I do with 2 or 3 hours on a Sunday if I'm not, God knows doing what?
Right. The options are endless. Spa days and fitness, and you're right.
Yeah.
It's all of it.
But there's also a guilt there's a guilt associated with a spa day or a laying on the couch watching a show. Like this woman said, I get in a funk. I don't want to take care of myself. There's too many other things to do. There's too many employees that need XYZ. For a business owner, an entrepreneur, one of the themes I see is they are really comfortable working in the business as opposed to zooming out and working on the business. And ultimately, as an owner, as an operator, as someone that wants to continue to kind of grow professionally, you have to get really comfortable with stepping away working on the business and actually spending less time, less hours in the nitty-gritty. But there's a comfort level if that's where you came from. We both know from coming from stores.
To say that's such a
There's
store
nothing better.
challenge.
It's such a store challenge. But
Yeah.
to like go to visit a store and look at merchandising and look at the stockroom without reorganizing yourself, it's a discipline.
Oh, and it's so
It's
rewarding in so many
it
ways.
is. Yeah. And so, for a lot of people, cleaning their house top to bottom on a Sunday is rewarding and they feel accomplished. And yet, the whatever it would cost is probably worth the cost to spend so that they can actually spend time with their husband, their children, their friends, themselves, and feel refreshed on the Monday. But it's a mindset shift and it's not easy.
Yeah. I want to wrap up our conversation, Loretta, and just think about you kind of reference as the hardest part of your book, which is women leading in a men's world and the honest conversations around that. And I'd love for you to just expand on that and you as a very senior executive on in a men's world. What are you sharing with people to think about the realization of this and advice for success?
It's interesting. The chapter title is A Boss, a Bitch, or a Bold, Brave Leader. And I would
I love it.
say, yes, I would say that over the course of my career, I was probably called all of them. But I think my legacy is the bold, brave leader. And there's a couple things I think are really important that leadership as a man versus a woman, it isn't the same. The standards aren't the same. The reception of a woman leader is not the same as a man leader. And that's life. Fair is something you pay on the bus. It's not fair. But that's okay as long as we know the game that we're playing and the world that we're in. And so I learned through a lot of trial and error and observation that the way you present yourself as a woman leader is really important. And don't ever kind of underestimate that. There's a great example I give in the chapter in my book around reorganization. And we had so many of those over the course of my career as business needs changed. And I'll never forget, really poring over the reorg and the effect that it was going to have on a lot of all the women in my organization who primarily were the breadwinners in their families. And my counterparts, whether they were overseeing menswear or footwear, and they had men and women, and they would make their decisions about who was going to get what job or who was going to get laid off or who was going to get demoted, like they were like reviewing, a class buy plan. And they were applauded for being really efficient and really direct. And I, pouring over it with painstaking kind of emotion and detail and trying to look a couple shots ahead to make sure that if I was going to put someone through a change, that I didn't do it again in 3, 6, or 12 months. It was really important for me to be really thoughtful. And so he was called directive and decisive. I was called difficult, overanalyzing, and slow. And that's okay. That's okay. I'm not going to be offended by you calling me any of those things because I know I'm taking care of my team. So I think it's you as a woman leader, you have to understand that the rules of operation and the game is different. I had a whole collection in my wardrobe that was just, I called it like the funeral collection. It was just all the black pieces that were appropriate for the board meeting because I was going into the waterboarding room with 10 men and 1 woman and me. And Okay, so I just knew that I needed to kind of play their game with the best kind of tools I had. I would say my advice for women leaders is you can be strong, you can be direct, you can be decisive, but you don't need to be difficult. You don't need to be controlling. You don't need to be combative. You don't need to be aggressive. You can still be true to who you are. I think empathy, compassion, curiosity, and the human side of things is going to get you way further. Um, I often think like, how would I want to be treated? How did my parents raise me with grace, resilience, determination, but with humility and curiosity? And that's my advice to women today, that the nice guys will finish first, as Gary Vee says. They're not last anymore. They're going to creep up and they're going to finish first.
Totally agree with you. I love that. It's a really good place to end this. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
I'm imagining you have inspired countless people who have worked for you, first degree, second degree, third degree, who have watched you navigate your career. And I can just, without even knowing it, I know that there are hundreds, if not thousands of people you've inspired through this.
Oh, thank
So thank,
you. I
thank you.
hope so. I hope so. Thank
I'm
you.
confident of it. Where can people find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram. I'm spotty on Substack. That's kind of, that's always on the back of my mind. But and then my own website, and it's all Loretta Soffe.
Amazing. Thank you, Loretta. And I will put the link to your book in the show notes, everyone. This is Retail in America, and I'm Ron Thurston. If there's something in this conversation that made you think differently about your own business, your selling floor, your team, or owning the first 60 seconds with the customer, pass this on to someone who needed to hear it. And I will be back very soon with another conversation about the human edge. Thanks again for listening.